There it goes. Okay. I realized I forgot to put a page that has some information about me. So yeah, if you don't know me from my candidacy for St. Paul City Council, you might know me from my Nerd Night presentations, Bubonic Plague, the OG Pandemic, or Winter Sowing Your Wild Oats, Transitioning Your Lawn to My Native Garden. Those are my handles if you want to follow it. So before we start, an unfortunate thing happens sometimes where people Google Bundism and then they find Nazi pages, they find white supremacists. So the way I like to explain it is that the Nazis called themselves the National Socialists, but they weren't socialists because socialism was very popular. Bundism was extremely popular, so they started using the word Bund to describe Nazi organizing. They co-opted progressive terminology to appeal to the masses. I know we have never seen any examples of that recently. Anyway, please refer to Bundism rather than calling it Bundism, which I just did, so don't follow my lead. Just refer to it as the Jewish Labor Bund, and that will avoid any confusion. Okay, so here are the principles of the Jewish Labor Bund. The first one is Doikite. This is a very popular one. So rather than thinking of Jewish people as belonging to a specific region, you think of where you live as your homeland. So you put down roots in your community, you adopt cultural practices of your local community, and you show solidarity with the people who are in your neighborhood. So regardless of their religious affiliation, racial background, gender, etc., class, although you wouldn't be friends with landlords, that would be right out. So the second one is Haverschaft, or Haverschaft. It doesn't have a perfect translation, but I like to use a pun and say that it's about camaraderie, like socialism. But most people just say solidarity, but I like saying camaraderie because of the fun pun. And then Yiddishkeit is the big one. It's about learning the Yiddish language, learning about the cultural artifacts of the Bundist time period. This is a little problematic because Yiddish is not the only language spoken by Jewish people. There's also Sephardi. But Bundists were Ashkenazi and they did speak Yiddish, so for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on Yiddish because that is true, but there's nothing to say that a Bundist couldn't speak Sephardi. There's no exclusion. It's just the predominant language spoken by the people who had this ideology. You do not need to be Jewish. It is a secular movement. You do need to accept the values, though. Like, you would need to really love Yiddishkeit. Like, if you don't like Jewish culture, you have kind of a rough time in the Bund, but that's a lot of what it's about. If you are anti-union, you probably wouldn't enjoy the Bund at all. And if you think that Jewish people should all move to a specific region in order to be real Jews, you would not do well at all. So I just said that the Bund was a secular movement. Ironically, it started at a rabbinical seminary. This was a surprise to me when I was researching this presentation. I didn't know that. So basically, a man who's named Arkady Finkelstein decided to join a rabbinical seminary and stir some stuff up. So he was handing out pamphlets and he was basically spreading the good word of socialism at this rabbinical school, and he was caught and kicked out, but it was too late. People were like, "Ooh, that's cool, I like that," and then they started the Bund. But I mean, I'm kind of skipping over. There was a lot that happened in the meantime. So I really want to call attention to the third paragraph where it says the creation of self-help funds. Now, I didn't create a slide about this. As I was walking up here, I thought of 5 more slides I could have added. Honestly, like, this is, for how niche this topic is, it's vast. But self-help funds, the concept of mutual aid, certainly wasn't invented by the Bundists, but it was very, very popular. And it was popular in a way that it wasn't as popular in other parts of Europe. And the word for it is called Landsmannschaft, which is the Yiddish word for mutual aid. So, and it was because of how poor Jewish people were in that area. They were segregated, they were kept from getting jobs. They basically had to be almost completely self-sustaining. So if anybody was poor or hungry, they had to be helped by other Jewish people. There really wasn't a social safety net per se. And of course, unionizing was a big part of that. You can only share so much if you don't have anything, and a big part of getting more to share is demanding more pay. This is a really important concept in Bundism. There's a region of Eastern Europe called the Pale. Many of us who are not Jewish and do not know anything about Bundism use the phrase "beyond the pale." Forgive me, I'm about to use a very, very problematic expression, but it's a good kind of comparison. Do you know when people say that someone is off the reservation? Have you ever heard that expression? That's something that boomers say sometimes. I actually had to tell my dad to stop using that expression. Beyond the pale is the equivalent. So Jewish people were restricted to certain areas, and when they left, it was considered dangerous. You were beyond the pale. You couldn't be killed. You didn't have the support of your community anymore. So that's why it was kind of a section that was like, I don't know, segregated for lack of a better word, but it wasn't like there was a law or anything. It was just kind of like, this is where people were settling. And this is where most of the shtetls were, which I'm going to get into later. And Yiddish was spoken, yes, they also spoke Polish, but because of how segregated the communities were, a lot of these people spoke Yiddish. That was the lingua franca, if you will. It basically tells you the historic regions that a lot of Jewish people lived in. There's also Latvia. There's a dialect of Yiddish called Litvak. The Litvak Jews lived in Latvia. Oh, sorry. Speaking of boomers, okay, so I like to talk about Austro-Marxism because it makes me sound really smart. The Bundists weren't technically Marxists, they were Austro-Marxists, well, that's hard to say. And the difference, you might be wondering, why would you make that distinction? What does it matter? It does matter because Marx did not believe in democracy. So that's an important difference. You might think, well, how different could two concepts be that are both Marxist? Marx believed that socialism was not what society should be built around. It was not that he didn't like socialism, but he thought it was a means to an end. That the beginning stage is late stage capitalism, where people are finally fed up with capitalism and move on to socialism. And socialism is like this sort of middle, temporary, sort of liminal space where we're sort of not quite communist yet, but we're getting rid of capitalism. And it's like a middle stage before you finally embrace communism. You don't need any elections because the workers are in charge and everybody's happy, right? Workers' socialist paradise, or communist paradise rather. The Austro-Marxists weren't communists. They were democratic socialists. And the reason I'm making such a big deal about that is there are some Bundists who don't believe in voting or elections, and I'm like, what are you, some kind of communist? No, I'm just kidding. And I should add, there's a lot of difference of opinion. You can ask, it's like the joke, ask two Jews get three opinions, right? So it's the same thing with Bundism. I'm sure, pick any other person who considers themselves Bundist, and you're going to get a completely different presentation with completely different emphasis. This is what I found when I did research, so I just think this is neat. Anyway, fun facts about Yiddish. Yiddish is Yiddish for Jewish. So that it's a little problematic because again, there's other languages like Ladino that are, and any language that a Jewish person speaks is a Jewish language in a sense. People, of course, always talk about Hebrew, and there's been a very politically motivated movement to get rid of Yiddish and replace it with Hebrew. We're not going to teach our kids Yiddish, we're not going to have Yiddish in Hebrew schools. And we'll get to why that's important later. Yiddish is a form of High German, and it's a medieval German way of speaking. It's kind of like if there was a small group of people that only spoke in medieval English, like Middle English, so like Renaissance Festival people, I guess. And then, this is the last part. I cannot overstate the importance of Yiddish as a political organizing tool. If you were Bundist, you sent your kids to Yiddish school. And now, as a neo-Bundist, I really feel like I should be learning Yiddish. I know a little bit. I know more than the average person, but I haven't taken Yiddish classes. I want to. I actually was taking on Duolingo, but then they went AI and oh, by the way, I didn't use AI for any of this. Thank you. Okay, popularity of Yiddish schools. So this is all taken from a magazine called Der Spechter, or Der Spechter. You can just say Der Spechter. You don't have to say Spechter if you don't want to. It sounds kind of weird to say it like that. But that's how you would pronounce it in Yiddish. And it means the ghost. And it's a modern-day Bundist magazine. And I am one of the contributing editors, so please go and read it. This is a recent article about the popularity of Yiddish schools and the importance of Yiddish schools in Bundism. Yeah, it's a really interesting article. I didn't read the whole thing, but this is basically the introduction to the article. If you want to learn more about this, there's a whole article about it. And then that picture is are some teachers from a Yiddish school. Russia was a very important area of Bundist organizing until it wasn't, because Stalin kind of cracked down on that. But for a hot minute, Russia was a hotbed of Bundist activity. Some of my ancestors came from Russia, and they were Jewish revolutionaries. No big deal. And then, yeah, so the word for school and also the word for synagogue is shul. So that's a good, important word to use. So they would have, and in America, this is kind of fun. They used American laws to skirt taxes. So they weren't religious schools. Yiddish schools were a secular project to teach Jewish people the Jewish language, but they were able to be tax exempt because they called them Sunday schools, and they subtly implied that they were for religious reasons. So they were not religious. They were 100% teaching these kids about unions and socialism, but they were tax exempt because people didn't understand the nuance of the situation. So anyway. So yeah, one of the most important arts and cultural artifacts of the era is the Dybbuk. It's a Yiddish play. There were many plays written at the time. This is 100% the most famous one. Has anyone seen A Serious Man? You all should be ashamed of yourselves. It's a cultural treasure of Minnesota. Go watch it. You're on notice. So the first 5 minutes of A Serious Man is a little mini movie about a Dybbuk. So it's basically the reason Jewish people are so insistent upon fast burial and getting the person in the Jewish burial ground and the blessings and the body preparation, which is a whole other presentation I could give about that, is because if you just leave a body and don't prepare it for burial and bless it and all that stuff, it could be inhabited by a Dybbuk, which is a demon, or a shadim, which is the Jewish word for demon, basically. So yeah. So this is a fun one. This is just a series of pictures that I like. Of the images that go hard in the world, this goes very hard as well. This is the International Ladies Garment Union. They had a Yiddish magazine called Gerechtigkeit, or Gerechtigkeit. And the International Ladies Garment Workers Union are also known for organizing the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Anybody know about that? Okay, for those of you who don't know, in New York, there was a factory that had almost entirely young Jewish women, and it caught on fire, and there weren't exits, and they were basically locked in and they all burned, or went out the window. It was real bad. So this union organized the workers. It was mostly Jewish women organizing. It was mostly Jewish women in the factory, and they were able to unionize the shirtwaist makers, the garment workers. So it was a big deal. So yeah, if you look in the corner, you can't really see it, it's not a very good image, but there's Mussolini, you can see the Yiddish labels. And it shows them marching to promote their union, and it shows them basically killing Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco. Here's another image from the ILGWU. Obviously, there were also male garment workers, so that's why I included this. This is a genre of art called social realism. So it's like usually for like socialists and unions. Okay, so remember the Pale? Well, when people talk about the settlements of the Pale, they mean these communal farms. They were throughout Eastern Europe. And then, yeah, so basically, I think they were kind of, I mean, this is just my opinion, I'm not an expert, but I feel like the shtetl is kind of the basis for the concept of socialism because they had communal living, they shared everything, they had mutual aid, the way they structured the work, etc. And unfortunately, because they were segregated, they were often burned to the ground and the inhabitants killed. During the bubonic plague, in fact, which is the presentation I gave before, because they were segregated, they were kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They were socially distanced from the Christians, and they sometimes wouldn't catch the plague. So the Christian community would be dying en masse, and then the Jewish community wouldn't be dying. It was because they didn't interact, they didn't mix. So they thought the Jews were causing the plague, so by poisoning wells, so they would just go and kill everybody in the Jewish community. That was a huge source of Jewish death at that period. And then there's also a joke in the Jewish community that Christians died of the plague at higher rates because they didn't know to wash their ass. So it's a fun joke that Jewish people say. So here's some books about Bundism. This is Molly Crabapple. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it like that. She's awesome. She's an illustrator, and she's a Bundist. And I wish I had met her in person. She's, I think, in East Coast. And then this is the magazine that I work for as a volunteer. Please go and check it out. If you thought this was interesting, there's way more articles than you could ever read. Here's a book written at the time. One thing to respect her and other projects of the Neo-Bundist movement is learning Yiddish so we can translate scads of untranslated Yiddish documents. Because a lot of this history was basically only known to people that spoke Yiddish, and now it's going to be made available to people who only speak English, which is great. This is a very popular book because it was written by a Bundist at the time. Here's a graphic novel, if you don't have any attention span. It's called A Graphic History of the Jewish Labor Resistance. And, oh, I'm out of slides. No. Oh, right. Does anybody have any questions? I've not read Doppelganger, but I love Naomi Klein, and I did read The Shock Doctrine, and I am familiar with the concept of Doppelganger. Did you have any particular? Yeah, Naomi Klein's really great, and she, yeah, I love her so much. But yeah, everyone check out all of Naomi Klein's books, they're great. The Doppelganger is what he was recommending. Anybody else?
I have a silly question.
Go ahead.
I agree with the idea of two free things. So, one thing that I can never get full agreement on, would you be allowed to have chicken on pizza?
Allowed to have chicken on pizza? So Bundists eat whatever we want.
Okay, so you don't care about that much separation.
So, okay, I just really want to emphasize this. The Bund is a secular movement. So Bundists don't necessarily eat kosher or observe holidays. Some of us do. I'm an observant Jewish person, and I just celebrated Yom Kippur. But in the historic Bund, they were anti-clerical, so they didn't really like religion per se. But what Bundists do is they take Jewish holidays and they put our own spin on it. So like a really popular thing to do in the 20s in New York was while Jewish people were fasting, the Bundists would go into like Central Park and have these massive ragers and eat like a ton, like have these big potluck buffets and drink. So it's not that they didn't celebrate Yom Kippur, it was just they just didn't observe it in like a reverent and traditional way. So anyway, yes? Oh, Duolingo, you can learn. The people that designed the Duolingo Yiddish program did a good job. Like, everyone agrees, it's a legit way to learn. I just stopped learning, because I have other things to do, and it's not that important to me, but also boycott because of AI. So, it gave me an excuse to slack off on learning Yiddish, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so that's a great question. If you want to learn Yiddish, please follow up with me. I can bore you and send you so many links, more links than you would ever want. A really popular thing that people are doing is in the Bund, like the actual Bundis, are finding progressive people that teach Yiddish, and it's like usually like $50 or pay what you can. Some of them are pay what you can, some of them are like a little more expensive. It depends. A lot of them are free, but not all of them are free. A lot of them require at least a small amount of money, because the people who spend all that time learning Yiddish want to make some money back from it. Fun fact, a lot of people who are fluent in Yiddish right now and who teach Yiddish are trans. And the reason that is because traditionally Judaism is one of the most gender-expansive religions. The Talmud has 6 genders. And that's not even in the Bund, that's like the religion. So gender-expansive identities have been a part of the Jewish faith for quite a while. So a lot of trans people, they aren't feeling welcomed in, some more conservative Christian communities, so they convert to Judaism, and they get so there's a joke that converts to Judaism are more enthusiastic Jews than people who are born in the faith. So like, trans people that convert to Judaism are like, yes, Yiddish, yes, Hebrew. So like, a lot of the people who teach the classes about Judaism and Yiddish and Hebrew are trans, because they're just really, really, really psyched about it. And I think it's great. And a lot of, does anyone know what a minyan is? Oh, yes, of course. So a minyan is a group of 10 Jewish men that are supposed to pray at least once a day together, which is kind of tricky if you have a job. So a lot of Jewish men don't bother with it. But if you do want a minyan, especially if someone has died and you need to do the special prayers for someone who's died, or like maybe do some ceremony for someone who's getting married, or for bat mitzvah, there's special occasions where you really should have a minyan. A lot of even Orthodox Jewish people accept trans men for a minyan. Because it's hard to find people for a minyan in the middle of the day, you know what I mean? So they're like, sure, you're a man, go up, come in. So, and of course, a lot of Reform Jews and a lot of more progressive Jews don't acknowledge gender at all. Like, if you have a minyan, it can be any gender person. I just think it's interesting that like a lot of Orthodox Jews accept trans men as men for a minyan because of the expediency. Nothing else. Does anyone have any other questions? Yes? Oh, brother, we're out there, obviously. I could sing all the songs in that movie. It's a weird phenomenon that Jewish people love, like folksy gospel songs. And I don't know why you wouldn't, like, there's no like, oh, it's Christian, I can't do it. No, it's like, doesn't matter. Like, I love singing Christmas music. Like, I'm in a choir, by the way, so if that matters. A lot of Jewish people love singing Shape Note. Several of my Jewish friends are in bluegrass bands. So I don't know, I just think that's a fun little aside that has nothing to do with Bundism. But all right, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.